On that gray afternoon in Hartford, Connecticut, I swore my life would follow a predictable course. College, a part-time job at the corner cafe, endless conversations with my cousins on weekends. I was 20, studying literature at the local university, and spent my mornings immersed in books. But everything changed the instant I pushed open the kitchen window and saw, on the other side of the fence, my grandmother Margaret leaning against the trunk of a giant maple tree, her eyes half closed, smiling at the neighbor's husband, a man 30 years her junior. The scene looked straight out of a cheap novel, but his touch on her hand was real, intimate, and brazen. My stomach churned. There, with the cold wind hitting my face, I realized the world I knew was about to crumble. For days, I guarded the secret like a cup filled to the brim. In classes, my gaze wandered. At work, my smile became automatic. At the dinner table, I watched my grandmother distribute calculated compliments to my mother, to my younger brother, as if she were an untouchable matriarch. Every gesture of hers seemed rehearsed. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined the scene in the backyard, but the warmth of their hands, the way they laughed together, haunted me like a burned photograph. In conversations with my best friend Sophie, I dropped hints, but lacked the courage to tell her everything. She looked at me with that serious expression, simply saying, "You need to talk to her, Ellie. This is going to consume you." The night I finally decided to confront her, the house was steeped in a brittle silence. I could hear the ticking of the old clock in the living room. My grandmother was sitting on the couch, knitting as if nothing in the world could shake her. I walked up to her, my heart pounding, and blurted out, almost in a whisper, but firm, "I know about you and Mr. Robinson." She looked up, and for an instant I saw a flash of fear, or was it fury, before she lifted her chin again. "Watch your words, Eleanor," she said, using my full name as a warning. "Don't make up stories." But her voice had a new tremor. It was the first crack in her perfect armor. That conversation didn't end with a confession or apologies. It ended with a heavy silence and a sense of threat hanging in the air. The next morning, I realized the damage. Cold phone calls from relatives, accusatory messages from aunts who never wrote to me, my brother looking at me confused. In some way, my grandmother had turned my confrontation into an inverted narrative. Now I was the ungrateful one, the liar, the rebellious granddaughter. Sophie's eyes on campus said it all. She turned you inside out. For the first time in my life, I understood how someone could lose not only their reputation, but also their support network in a matter of hours. Still, in the midst of the chaos, a spark of courage ignited. I started documenting everything. Conversations, dates, times, details. Every furtive glance from her, every message, every sudden change in relatives' attitudes. I began to notice patterns that had previously gone unnoticed. She didn't just have secret meetings. She manipulated narratives, moved the pieces of an entire family like a chess game. I was no longer just hurt. I was alert. And for the first time, I thought, maybe I could turn the tables. And as I walked back to the dorm on that cold night, my phone vibrating with more hostile messages from cousins I barely knew, I felt something rearrange itself inside me. It wasn't just indignation. It was a plan being born. An ardent desire to prove the truth, not to humiliate her, but to free myself from that suffocating web. But I didn't yet know that by pulling on this thread, I would uncover secrets far darker than a simple extramarital affair. It was exactly at that moment, on the threshold between fear and determination, that I realized my grandmother wasn't just an old woman having an affair. She was the center of something bigger, older, and more intricate. Something that could destroy not only my name but also my identity if I didn't act fast. I couldn't imagine that in a few days, an object forgotten in her attic would change everything. An object that would not only confirm my suspicions, but reveal a history of manipulation that had run in my family for generations, hidden under rugs and polite smiles. And that object would be the key to reclaiming my voice, or to losing everything at once. The following days were like walking through a corridor of broken mirrors. Every phone call from a distant uncle came loaded with veiled accusations. Every cousin's message felt like a judgment. My grandmother Margaret not only denied everything, but masterfully turned the tables. Now I was the ungrateful granddaughter, inventing stories to tarnish the honor of a woman who always sacrificed for the family. At every Sunday lunch, I felt sharp glances following me, as if everyone was waiting for my next scandal. That network of relatives that had always supported me transformed into a labyrinth of distrust. I tried to speak, to explain, but my voice seemed to hit invisible walls. It was as if my grandmother had handed out ready-made scripts to each family member, and everyone acted them out without question. It was during this phase that I learned to live in silence, to observe. Sophie, my only true friend, would text me at night, "Ellie, she's isolated you. You need to protect yourself." And I would reply only with neutral emojis, fearing that even our conversations were being monitored. I started writing everything down in a notebook hidden under my dorm mattress. Who called, what they said, the expressions on my mother's face when I tried to speak. This habit gave me a strange sense of control, as if every written word was a brick laid to protect myself. Sometimes in the middle of class, I would catch the scent of my grandmother's perfume, that old aroma that blended talc and power, and it was as if she were right there, watching. One night, my mother called me crying. "She said you're spreading horrible lies, Eleanor, that you want to destroy our family." Her voice sounded like a lost child's. I don't know who to believe. That tore me apart. That was exactly Margaret's game, making everyone choose sides while she remained at the center, untouchable. I took a deep breath and said softly, "Mom, I'm not the one destroying anything. I just want the truth." The silence on the other end of the line told me that, deep down, she knew, but she was too afraid to admit it. The following week, I decided to act more subtly. I knew exploding wouldn't work. I had to infiltrate. I started visiting my grandmother's house, feigning reconciliation, with measured smiles and innocent questions. I took the opportunity to rummage through drawers, cabinets, and old boxes. The closer I got to her, the more I realized that the affair with the neighbor was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. A network of favors, blackmail, and small secrets accumulated over the years. The clues were there, scattered, waiting for someone to put the pieces together. And then came the night of the family dinner. My grandmother stared at me with a thin smile, her eyes gleaming with something that wasn't quite joy. "Darling, do you know what I told Aunt Ruth? That you're seeing a married professor from college. I said you inherited my charms. You just don't know how to use them properly." The giggles at the table sounded like blades. My face burned, but I swallowed my anger. It was then I realized she had no limits, that she was willing to destroy me publicly to maintain control. It was also there, at that table, that my plan took real shape. I needed to find proof. I needed to turn the story in my favor. After dinner, I feigned feeling unwell and left early. I went up to the old room where I slept during visits and pulled out a small key I had found in the house's basement weeks earlier. I didn't know yet what it opened, but I felt it was important. As the distant murmur of conversations echoed through the house, I imagined what could be behind that locked door in the attic. My heart pounded as if each beat were a step towards the truth. The next day, I woke up with the certainty that I needed to act before she completely crushed my reputation. I called Sophie and, my voice firm despite my nervousness, told her my plan. "Ellie, this is too risky," she said. "But if you have proof—" I swallowed hard. "It's the only way. She took everything from me. I can't let her take who I am too." For the first time, I felt Sophie hesitate, but then I heard a whisper of support. "I'm with you." And that same afternoon, under a leaden sky, I took the train back to Hartford with the key in my pocket and my decision made. I knew I was about to cross a line of no return. If it worked, I would have the truth in my hands. If it failed, she would have my entire future to crush. If you've ever felt that someone powerful has distorted your story and left you isolated, you know the mix of fear and fury that courses through your body like electricity. And if this story has touched you so far, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your own experience in the comments. It's not just a request to grow. It's a way to create a support network for everyone who has experienced something similar. Your voice might be the comfort someone else needs right now. That night, I went up to my grandmother's attic for the first time in years. The smell of old wood, dust, and something metallic hung in the air. Each step creaked under my weight as if warning of my presence. And as I stood before the locked door, with the cold key in my sweaty hand, I realized there was no turning back. What was behind that door could free me, or condemn me forever. The attic felt like an old lung of the house, breathing forgotten memories. The bare bulb hanging from the exposed wire trembled slightly, casting uneven shadows on the sloped walls. My heart pounded so loudly I feared my grandmother could hear it downstairs. The key turned in the bolt with a dull click, and the cold air that escaped the room seemed to have been trapped there for decades. I pushed the door open cautiously, and a smell of old paper, faded perfume, and oxidized metal enveloped me like a wave. Inside, stacks of boxes covered by sheets formed makeshift corridors, and in the darkest corner, an old dresser with locked drawers displayed an envelope with my name handwritten, shaky, as if someone had been in a hurry to hide it. With trembling hands, I pulled out the envelope and opened it. Inside were photographs taken from a distance. Me walking through the university, talking with Sophie, having lunch with my assistant professor. Images that could only have been obtained through surveillance. The shock made me sit on the floor. There was proof that my grandmother not only manipulated the narrative but also monitored me. Near the photos, a leather binder contained detailed notes on every relative, with dates, times, intimate secrets, veiled threats, even bank transactions of people I didn't even know. It was a blackmail map, a manual for controlling entire lives. I picked up one of the pages and read in silence, my eyes welling up. My grandmother had recorded my conversations with my father before he passed away. She had even kept letters I never mailed, intercepted without my knowledge. I felt the world spin. "My God," I whispered. The creak of the floorboards behind me sent a chill down my spine. For a second I thought she was there, but it was just wind coming through a crack in the window. I took a deep breath, closed the binder, and shoved everything deep into my backpack. At that moment, I understood that her betrayal was bigger than an affair. It was a lifetime of manipulation, of invisible webs that strangled any attempt at freedom. As I slipped the envelope into my pocket, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Sophie. "Did you get it?" I typed quickly, "More than I imagined." She replied, "Come back soon, and be careful." I descended from the attic carefully, the floorboards creaking as if counting each step. Upon reaching my room, I locked the door and sat on the bed, breathing heavily. The truth was with me, but I was still a piece on her chessboard. If Margaret suspected what I had discovered, she could destroy what little was left of my life. The next day, I feigned normalcy at breakfast. My grandmother served pancakes with that unshakable smile. My brother watched the news distractedly. My mother fiddled with her phone. The atmosphere seemed domesticated, but every gesture of hers now seemed like a performance. "Did you sleep well, dear?" she asked, her voice too soft. "I slept, yes, but I dreamed of doors opening," I replied, looking at her with a half smile. She paused for a moment, a spark of suspicion passing through her eyes, and then resumed her usual tone. I began to meticulously craft a plan. It wasn't enough to expose the affair with the neighbor. I needed to reveal the entire monster. Sophie suggested I use the student press, but I knew that would be too risky. I preferred to start discreetly, photographing the binder pages and saving them to a cloud with encrypted password. If something happened to me, someone would have access. Meanwhile, my grandmother intensified her psychological warfare. She sent cutting messages about me to relatives, trying to isolate me even further. Sometimes she called my mother in the middle of the night to plant new suspicions. But for the first time, I didn't just feel anger. I felt strategy. I had something she didn't. The truth. One night, on campus, I sat with Sophie on a bench under a huge oak tree. "You have to think about the endgame, Ellie. There's no point in having proof if she can paint you as crazy." I sighed, squeezing my eyes shut. "That's why I need the right event. Something public. Something she can't manipulate." Sophie looked at me sideways. "Are you thinking about the annual party?" I nodded. The annual party my grandmother organized at the local club was perfect. All the influential names in town would be there, and if the right cards were dealt to the right people, she wouldn't be able to erase the truth. This idea haunted me for days. As I walked through the university corridors, as I borrowed books from the library, as I pretended to listen to my classmates, every thought returned to that illuminated hall, that gala night, and to the moment I would place every piece of evidence into the hands of her allies and accomplices. But there was a risk. She was unpredictable. If she caught on to my plan, she could react violently. I started sleeping with my phone recording, locking doors, avoiding dark paths. Sometimes I woke up with the feeling that someone was in my room, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air, even though I knew it was impossible. It was her psyche infiltrating mine. Yet, amidst this fear, a trace of hope blossomed. Remembering my father's face, my mother's lost dignity, I realized I wasn't just fighting to prove something. I was fighting to reclaim my family's history. It was this conviction that made me walk with my head held high when I crossed paths with my grandmother in the house's corridors, even when she gave me that predatory look. On the eve of the annual party, I went to the attic one last time, just to check if I had left any traces. Everything was in its place, but I felt a shiver when I noticed that one of the boxes had been moved. I didn't touch it. I just left, trying not to show haste. I knew that if she had noticed something, she might have set a trap to destabilize me, but I also knew I was one step away from the decisive moment, and there was no turning back. It was like this, caught between fear and courage, that I found myself again in front of the dorm mirror, adjusting the dress I would wear to the event. Behind the reflection, there seemed to be two versions of me, the cornered girl and the woman determined to break free. I took a deep breath, knowing that this night would decide everything. The scent of the freshly ironed dress mingled with the faint aroma of lavender I sprayed just to protect myself, as if perfume could act as an amulet. I lowered my hand, felt the fabric slide against my skin, and my heart raced with an old, almost ancestral nervousness. I felt a sudden urge to call my mother, just to hear her voice undisguised, but I feared she might answer on speakerphone, with my grandmother listening to every breath. As I watched my reflection, I touched the silver bracelet that belonged to my great-grandmother, one of those small symbols that survive family scandals. I could almost hear her voice. "Eleanor, every woman has a secret. The important thing is not to be devoured by them." It could have been just another murmur my mind invented to comfort me, but in that moment, sounding like someone from my lineage was a kind of power. On the way to the local club, where the party would take place, the Uber's headlights cut through Hartford's cold fog, and I looked out the windows, watching the city in slow motion. Each light in the old houses seemed to carry a story, a lie, a veiled pact, all swirling with no one daring to stop and ask what, in fact, kept the facades standing. I impulsively grabbed my phone. My hands felt sweaty and I almost dropped it on the car floor. I sent a message to Sophie. "I've arrived at the club. If I disappear, you know where to look." Instantly, the reply came, like a silent pact. "Love you. Call me during the break." "And I brought the mint, in case you need to hide your nervousness." She completed it with a smiling emoji. I smiled wryly, taking a deep breath before getting out of the Uber. The cold outside was almost a warning, but I pressed on. In the main lobby, golden lights bathed silk paper walls. Old lamps hid shadowy corners where glances met only to quickly dart away. The sound of clinking glasses, forced laughter, fragments of political conversations, and in the center, Margaret. She seemed right at home, conducting the room like a merciless maestro. I crossed the ballroom, feeling the weight of gazes, some curious, others purely judgmental. Ignoring everything, I looked for my cousin Rebecca, the one who always sent me kitten gifts but, in recent days, had only interacted with wide-eyed emojis. She was leaning near the punch table, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. I approached casually. Rebecca gave a brief smile. "Your grandmother is unbearable today. She thinks everyone is here just because of her." I paused before speaking, careful not to sound too bitter. She was right. The atmosphere is electric. Rebecca shook her head, her eyes avoiding mine. "Are you okay? I saw some things about you in the family group. Sorry for not replying sooner." There was a moment of silence. as if the real topic wasn't allowed to be discussed in the brightly lit room. I replied softly, "I just wish someone for once would trust me." Rebecca exhaled sharply and set her glass on the table. "Maybe they trust you more than it seems. My father, he said Margaret keeps old papers in the club's basement safe. He saw it once, years ago, when he went to get some bottles for the party. He said there were photos, letters, and things that didn't seem to be family-related." My heart leaped in my chest. Before I could react, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I smelled the relentless scent of talc and lavender. "Eleanor, dear, come take a picture with me. Tonight is so special." That voice, so sweet in front of others, sounded like a private threat. I nodded, my face slightly trembling. As Margaret led me to the center of the room and the photographer adjusted the lens, all eyes on us. The flash went off just as she murmured to me alone, "Every family has its black sheep, but the one who challenges the flock never ends well." In the background of the photo, Rebecca averted her gaze. During dinner, my entire performance consisted of calculated smiles, small bites, and moderately loud laughter. Margaret reigned supreme, praised by everyone, for the menu, the decor, the amusing stories she told from her youth. Every word seemed like a brick in the fortress of her reputation. At some point, I pretended I needed to go to the restroom and walked through the club's corridors to a flight of stairs that led down to the basement. My heart more than ever was beating too loudly. I thought it could be heard from upstairs. In the dark basement, only a dim bulb hung over old boxes and a metal cabinet. I searched for the safe lock Rebecca had mentioned. I heard light footsteps descending and hid behind the boxes, holding my breath. "Who's there?" It was Mr. Robinson's voice. A chill ran down my spine. I remained motionless, listening to him open the cabinet, rummage through something, then close everything and leave. I was almost caught by a hair's breadth. When I was sure I was alone again, I searched the cabinet. There were leather folders, old envelopes, a black and white photo torn in half. I picked up one of the letters, the shaky handwriting of a young woman named Elizabeth, dated 1969. "Dear Margaret, I need you to keep your promise, or everyone will know." Before I could read more, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed again, this time thin heels, unmistakable. I closed the folder, put everything back in a rush. I didn't even have time to put it away properly. I ran back up to the corridor as if fleeing my own home. Suddenly, I ran into my mother in the hallway. She held a glass of wine, her face tired, as if she already knew everything and was trying to hide it. "Daughter, where are you? Everyone's asking." I tried to answer without giving anything away. "I just went to get some air. It's so stuffy in here." She looked at me, hesitating. "I wanted to believe you, Ellie. I swear I did." A tightness rose in my chest, a desire to hug her and tell her everything, but the words wouldn't come out. "You know, Mom, sometimes a family's silence speaks louder than shouts." She closed her eyes softly, as if that truly hit her. Returning to the ballroom, Margaret was already standing at the microphone, announcing the toast. The entire room stood up. I raised my glass, but deep down I knew this party was just the facade. The real dance, the one of secrets, had begun. At the moment of the toast, my phone vibrated in my dress pocket. A message from Sophie. "I found something about your grandfather. Call when you can. Urgent." I swallowed hard. Margaret's smile shone for everyone, but her eyes, when they landed on me, were sharp blades. And as the soft music filled the hall, I knew, without a doubt, tonight, someone would lose control. I just had no idea who it would be first. The toast resonated like a sentence. The crystal of the glasses reverberated through the hall, but inside me, the world seemed to have stopped, suspended only by that desperate beep from my phone in my pocket. I tried to keep my face serene, but Sophie's message words burned in the back of my mind. "I found something about your grandfather. Call when you can. Urgent." As the music began, an old jazz tune, a bit out of fashion, but with touches of forced elegance, I pretended to need some air, for real this time. I stepped out into the side garden, feeling Margaret's gaze on my shoulders until the last inch of the glass door. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling. "Sophie, what happened? Tell me quickly." I can't stay long. On the other end, accelerated breathing, the sound of a television in the background. Ellie, I was sifting through those old county online archives. I wanted to know why your grandfather was so erased from the family stories. You know? And… Sophie, for heaven's sake, get to the point. She lowered her voice, as if fearing someone was listening. Your grandfather, before he met your grandmother, he was already married. He disappeared from his first family. There's a public abandonment lawsuit. And guess who was the witness in his case? The night's chill seeped into my bones. I have no idea. Margaret. She testified against his wife. And weeks later, they got married. The ground swayed. Suddenly, everything in my family seemed built on quicksand. A long silence followed. Ellie, are you there? I swallowed hard, looking at the ballroom lights inside. I am. Thank you, Sophie. I don't even know where to begin. At that very moment, I heard a low voice in the garden. Eleanor? I froze. It was my younger brother, Ben, on the other side of the low fence, his arms tucked into his large jacket. I didn't often see Ben at adult parties. He preferred video games and books. But there he was. Are you running away too? I smiled, feeling the tension ease just a little. He sat beside me on the stone bench, his hands fiddling with his hoodie pocket. Mom said you're different, that you're getting into trouble, but I don't believe her. Thanks, Ben, but maybe it's better if you do believe her. Sometimes I wonder if I'm not actually going crazy. He chuckled softly. You don't look crazy. You just think everyone lies. And you? Do you believe me? Ben became serious. If you were lying, you wouldn't be so anxious. I looked at him, thinking about how children, or almost teenagers, sometimes see everything with more truth than we do. I wanted to hold his hand and ask for help, but I couldn't involve Ben any more than he already was. You know, Ben, if one day everything explodes and you have to choose, you can trust yourself before trusting any adult, including me. He nodded awkwardly and stood up. He started to walk back, but before crossing the gate, he turned to me. I like you, Ellie. Even when you're strange. I could only manage a smile, with a lump in my throat, as he disappeared from sight. The night's tally seemed to be only anxiety and unanswered questions. But something was starting to change. Suddenly, it wasn't just about proving I was right anymore. It was about deciphering who Margaret truly was, and what she might have done with the past to erase my grandfather completely. I returned to the ballroom, the party more lively and at the same time faker than ever. Margaret, surrounded by aunts and uncles with plasticized expressions, looked at me, and in the depths of those carefully made-up wrinkles, there was an almost cruel satisfaction. I tried to ignore it. I searched the room for Rebecca, but couldn't find her anywhere. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen her since our conversation about the safe. The music changed. The atmosphere, too. A formal dance began. One of those nobody likes but everyone pretends to adore at parties. I felt a deep weariness. I leaned near the drink counter and there was Mr. Robinson, laughing loudly, already a bit drunk, surrounded by distant men and suspicious wives. When my gaze met his, I finally saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. He lowered his eyes, turned his back. I stood there, trying to understand how that fear fit into this whole web of manipulation. In the middle of the ballroom, my mother approached. Can you at least try to enjoy yourself? Just for tonight? I saw in her face, behind the foundation and made-up eyes, a resigned exhaustion. Mom, have you never wondered why everyone believes her so much? Why no one wants to see the other side? She ran her fingers across her forehead, trying to hold back tears. Because it's easier. Because believing her is less work. And whispering very softly so I almost couldn't hear. Because if it's true, what's left for us? The party slowly faded, with the lights being turned off one by one like an old movie. I don't think I've ever felt so alone surrounded by so many people. On the way back home, inside the Uber, I opened the torn photo I'd taken from the safe and hidden in my dress pocket again. 2 people. My grandmother, younger, and an unknown man. On the back, only the initials, M+J. Forever, until the end. At the gate of my house, before putting the key in the door, I prayed that Rebecca was okay. that I could ask her what else her father had seen at the club years ago, about the photos and letters. But the house remained silent, dark, and a sense of loss began to take shape. The next day, I woke up to the phone ringing, annoying, insistent, as if in a hurry to deliver terrible news. It was Rebecca's mother, her voice choked, almost unrecognizable. "Ellie, I don't know how to tell you this. Becky was in an accident last night coming back from the club. She didn't make it." The world stopped again, but now it seemed definitive. I stood paralyzed, feeling every part of my body go cold. Rebecca was the silent link that gave me courage. Without her, all of this seemed even more dangerous, heavier, more impossible. I thought of our last conversation, the words, the insinuations, and the danger she might have already felt. I ran to my mother, broke down crying like a child. She hugged me without understanding anything, but for the first time in years she truly hugged me. She just kept repeating softly, "I'm so sorry, daughter. So sorry." That night, I messaged Sophie. "Rebecca is gone. There's no one left to talk to me about the club, about what she knew. Now it's just me." Sophie took a while to respond, perhaps scared, perhaps having to digest the death from a distance. When she finally replied, she got straight to the point. "Now it's truly dangerous. Protecting yourself is no longer a choice. It's a necessity." Before going to sleep, I looked out the window and saw Margaret in profile, walking slowly across the yard, unhurried, like a predator. I felt an old dread, as if behind that silence there was a trapped scream. Rebecca's loss became a turning point. From then on, everything smelled of concrete, with no illusion of lightness. I knew I needed to gather every piece of evidence, every secret. And the next clue was much closer than I imagined, inside a yellow envelope forgotten at the bottom of my backpack. But I had no idea that what I would find would change even my idea of what it meant to be part of that family. You know, as I tell this, I feel there's no easy way to deal with losses and family secrets like these. If you've been through something similar, if you've ever felt alone among those who should protect you, share it with me. I promise I'll read everything. And maybe we'll find each other in this pain and these discoveries. And tell me where you're listening from, because this, as virtual as it may seem, is a real living room for me. Late night. The house was silent, but I was electric. No room for sleep with the yellow envelope throbbing at the bottom of my backpack. I sat in the kitchen, opening the folder slowly. Inside, even older letters, scribbles in delicate handwriting that almost trembled. I recognized the initials, M for Margaret, J for... But no, it wasn't my grandfather's name. I felt the world spin. Margaret, in her early 20s, in love with another man. Letters filled with a hunger for life, a guilt strangling any glimmer of tenderness. A fragment chilled me to the bone. "If you open your mouth, Jay, I'll destroy everything you have left. Remember, it's not love that moves me. It's survival." The rustle of light footsteps in the hallway. My heart pounded, but I continued. Another letter, less romantic. "Margaret, I need the money. I can't stand your anonymous threatening messages anymore. My son is afraid of me. Your guilt has devastated me. Let me go, please." 5 words crossed out below everything. They will never know the truth. I wanted to run to my mother's room, ask for shelter, but something held me back. The distant scent of lavender wafted through the air. I turned my face and found Margaret, haunting, standing in the doorway, dry eyes, no shadow of emotion. "Did you think I wouldn't know? That you could meddle where you weren't called?" Her voice was so thin and sharp that I trembled. "Why did you never tell about Jay? Why did you destroy my grandfather and his family before him?" She walked slowly. The lampshade cast monstrous shadows on the wall. "Because no one survives by being weak, Eleanor. Your grandfather was weak. You're like him. You feel too much. You hesitate too much. You believe the truth saves someone. I am what's left after the truth breaks down all doors." I wanted to answer, but my voice vanished. She threw the letters on the table, lowered herself to my eye level. "You think you understand secrets. You couldn't bear to live half of what I've already buried. This here," she pointed to the letter, "is not love. It's ammunition. Your destiny was not to know." My blood turned to ice. "Becky died because she got too involved, didn't she? Did you do something?" She laughed, a harsh, unsurprised laugh. "Nothing happens here without my consent. But some losses are collateral damage." My stomach churned. "You destroy everything you touch. Always have." "Why?" Margaret answered with the harshness of someone who has already decided. "Those who build walls survive, not bridges. Your friend was inconvenient, just as you are being now." I felt the real danger, a pulse of animal fear, when I saw her hand gripping the heavy antique candlestick from the table, her face swollen with rage, eyes merciless, empty. "What are you going to do? Hit me? Kill me so the last thing in your lineage stays intact?" She smiled coldly. "Do you think anyone would miss you, Ellie? Your mother lives in a fog. Not even the men in the family understand you. You just complicate things. Get in the way." She made a move to lift the candlestick, and then the image froze. The door suddenly burst open, not with a bang, but with the desperate urgency of someone who knows that scene from the inside. Both of them entered. My mother, her face ravaged, and Rebecca's mother, her eyes full of tears, but her posture upright, courageous. They stopped, seized by panic, but firm. My mother screamed, "Margaret, put that down! Don't you dare touch my daughter!" In shock, Margaret hesitated. Rebecca's mother crossed the room, tears already streaming. "Your cruelty killed my daughter. Now you won't take hers." Margaret, unable to retreat, lowered the object, oscillating between panic and the most primal hatred. My mother came to me, withered and giant at the same time, hugging me tightly. "Forgive me, daughter. Forgive me for being afraid of her all these years, for never protecting you." The silence in the kitchen was grotesque. All that could be heard was the gasping of the mothers and the contained sobbing of someone about to fall into the abyss of everything they pretended not to see. Rebecca's mother spoke, each syllable a punch. "I've heard enough now to know you were never a heroine, Margaret. The letters, the threats, the fears. Enough. We won't fear you anymore." Margaret didn't answer. She simply sat down, her hands trembling, her royalty stripped away in seconds. My mother kissed the top of my head. Rebecca's mother picked up her phone and called someone. There, suddenly, 3 generations were united not by love, but by a courage previously impossible. We fell to the floor, together, shattered, but free from Margaret's spell. Behind us, she pulled her coat around her, turned to the door, and spoke softly, almost unrecognizable. "This doesn't end like this. Not for me." And she vanished into the darkness of the house, leaving behind, for the first time, something akin to defeat. The next morning brought a thick, almost unnatural silence. That kind of silence that only happens when something old has finally broken, and there's no going back to pretending. I found my mother on the porch, cross-legged, drinking coffee for the first time without makeup since I could remember. We looked at each other for a long time. The weight of what she had heard the night before was still etched beneath her eyes. "I wish I had listened sooner," she said, in a small voice. I sat beside her, hugging my legs, not knowing if I wanted to cry or simply disappear. "I guess it's never too late, Mom." I tried, my voice hoarse, worn. "We spend our lives surviving the versions they created for us. At some point, you have to choose to live differently, even if it hurts." My mother rested her head on my shoulder. "Thank you for not giving up on me." It was then that we saw, across the street, Margaret's house with its windows already closed. The police came and went, not to arrest, but to gather statements. Margaret was not detained, but she never again occupied the same chair at the table. For weeks, she disappeared from circulation. Her power dissolved, not because someone punished her from outside, but because everyone, finally, knew what she truly was. At Rebecca's funeral, I saw her mother for the last time. We exchanged knowing glances of pain. She hugged me tightly. "My daughter was brave for loving you, Ellie. Don't let Margaret's fear live in anyone else." "I promise I won't," I replied, feeling Rebecca's absence palpably, but learning a new kind of strength. that of continuing for those who could no longer. Days passed, and Ben started sleeping with his bedroom door open. No one fought over silly things anymore. Even my father, usually absent, asked about the old letters, the stories he never told. One rainy afternoon, my mother came into my room with an old shoebox. Inside were clippings, photos, a letter from her to her own mother from when she was my age. She sat beside me on the floor. "It's yours now. You deserve to remember the right way." I leafed through each piece, feeling, for the first time, that perhaps our family's story, so twisted, deserved to be told differently, not to glorify Margaret, nor to hate her, but to understand the root of the silence, the fear, those inherited walls. One night, I received a message from Sophie. "How are you really?" I replied, "Scared, exhausted, but free. I think I escaped the cycle." Late at night, the kitchen in shadow, I saw my mother closing the last window, ready to go to bed early. I felt a strange impulse. I went to her and said, "You can leave the porch light on tonight." She smiled softly, almost like a girl. "Why?" "Just because, finally, there's nothing to hide." We hugged. Together we looked at the heavy sky. I, for the first time in years, with a little peace in my chest. No grand reconciliation. It wasn't necessary, really. What remained was more precious. The privilege of having survived the truth, and the silent promise that this story would not repeat itself. Well, our story has come to an end, and if you've made it this far, my most sincere thanks for sharing this journey through secrets, losses, and reconstructions with me. Family stories are always thorny, but they also remind us of the power we have to change our own, even when it seems impossible. And now I want to hear from you. Have you lived through something that made you rethink your family's past? Do you have a secret, memory, or significant episode that you'd like to hear about here someday, or even tell anonymously? Share it with me, comment, send a message or email. Your story matters. Your voice makes a difference. And who knows? It might be inspiration for the next episode. Tell me also where you're listening from and what topics move your heart. Here, every memory finds a safe place. Thank you very much for walking together. I await you in the next chapters because, deep down, every family has a closed door waiting to be opened.